In our role, there's an spoken kind of, I guess, understanding that when you have your headphones on, you're to be left alone. Like, is the building on fire? Okay, you can interrupt my headphone time. Is the building not on fire? Now's not the appropriate time for a conversation.
From the cubicle to the lab, the studio to the war room, climbing the corporate ladder, or joining a scrappy startup, experience a day in the life of the jobs you want. This is the Experience a Diddle podcast.
A diddle, spelled ADITL, stands for A Day in the Life, and that's exactly what we do. We interview professionals, entrepreneurs, and recent grads about what a day is actually like, hour by hour on the job. This podcast will inspire you to gain experience beyond the classroom and launch a career of your own.
We're your hosts, Krista Bowe
and Matt Poe. Welcome to part one in the two-part Software and Soft Skills series with software engineer at Blend, Keith Soura. In this episode, we're going to experience a day in the life, hour by hour, in Keith's role so you can see if this is a career that's right for you. Plus, you'll learn a little something along the way. Before we jump into the day, let's learn about Blend as a company and how Keith fits into their puzzle.
My name is Keith Soura, and I have the ubiquitous title of software engineer, called many different things at many different places. And I work for a company called Blend, formerly Blend Labs. And we are a company that works on bringing transparency to consumer finance through software, creative software solutions. Basically, we partner with lenders, reporting agencies, credit agencies, and consumers to create software that makes getting home loans easier. Basically, we build software that empowers lenders or the partners that we use. While what we build is consumer facing, most consumers will never see anything about our company when they log in. So you may go to your bank website and apply for a mortgage or an auto loan or home insurance and not see our logo. You'll see the logo of the companies that we're representing. You would think of us as powered by Blend. When I originally started at Blend, I came in working on integrations engineering, which is a big part of what we do because we're kind of a hub for a lot of different partners. Like I said, credit agencies, banks, legacy software, non-legacy software. And so building the network that connects all those things is a pretty integral part of the company. So we have a team of folks, which we used to call integrations, that did just that part, as opposed to building the core kind of user-facing part of the platform. And that has evolved over time as the company's grown to be a more central part of kind of our ecosystem of software that we're developing. And so now we just go by the title software engineer, just like all the other engineers at the company. And I generally still focus a lot on those sort of integration points. So if you perhaps have a legacy system and you need to talk to, some new first-class cloud software like Salesforce or something like that, our group would help construct those kind of integration points.
In case you didn't know the difference between legacy and non-legacy softwares, Keith told us the difference between the two is legacy software can be thought of as any software that was custom built for a very specific purpose. Examples are bank transaction processing. Keith generally uses this to more broadly discuss non-cloud on-premise installations versus cloud software that runs on platform as a service or logging as a service services such as Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud. Now that we got that vocab lesson out of the way, you could be wondering how involved Blend is with sensitive financial data from their clients and their clients' clients.
I think it's an important differentiator for our company that one of the ways that we preserve the privacy of both our clients, who are these partners or the lending institutions, and their clients, is that we don't really deal directly with any of the actual decision making around the consumer finance. We just build systems that allow these companies better visibility into their borrowers. And so we don't deal with any kind of complicated financial models. We have a lot of machine learning models that help us apply rules and things like that, but they're not actually related to your personal finances. We rarely see that information in the cases that we do collect data like that. It's usually from machine to machine, just connecting one group with the lender that needs some data, and we pass it through in a really safe, encrypted way. We don't really examine that information.
It's 6 a.m. on a Monday in New York City, and Keith and his husband are waking up and getting ready to hit the gym.
I think Monday's an interesting day because the finance world runs on this like Monday to Friday sort of clock, except during the summers when everyone just like leaves on Friday for some reason. It's kind of magical. I don't leave, but other people do. And so Monday is sort of the recoup day where you have 2 days worth of server logs to look at. Anyway, so yeah, Monday. So my entire life, I have enjoyed food way more than I should. And the corollary to that is that so that I don't die at a young age, I also work out. And so Monday through Friday, I have personal training in the mornings and I love it. It's like one of my favorite parts of my day because it wakes me up.
Keith makes breakfast because he physically has to due to his grueling workout, but if it were up to him, breakfast would never be a thing for him. Lunch, though, is another story. So after the gym, he commutes to work on his bike, and this is usually always the case for Keith, unless it's icy or raining for obvious reasons. Keith arrives at the office around 9:30 a.m., but not before he pays a visit to Starbucks. What's your order?
I actually really love iced lattes, even when it's cold outside. So just a plain, unsweetened grande iced latte. That's it. Sometimes if I'm getting really crazy, I put a pump of hazelnut in it. That's a crazy, when I know it's going to be a hard day.
A little treat in the morning.
That's right. So grab that, run upstairs, and I am big into organizing my day when I first get there. I actually have calendar blocks for it in my schedule. So my first calendar block is always 30 minutes of like admin time, which is doing the rest of my calendar and making sure things are in order for the day, because otherwise I'll forget. And then I kind of move on from there.
You mentioned you power up your laptop. I want to talk about what kind of laptop you have because you're in a technical role. It's very important.
So I'm going to soapbox for a minute. So a lot of folks are really pumped about having super powerful laptops. It's just like tons of memory. And if it doesn't weigh 30 pounds, then it's not really a programmer's laptop. But my response to that is that pretty much everything is in the cloud now. Every one of my servers runs on some hardware that someone, Amazon owns or Google owns, right? I don't need to carry a heavy laptop. I have a MacBook Pro. It's great. I mean, it is a super powerful computer, but at the same time, I can connect to any server I want with any amount of power or memory that I want at any time, as long as I have the internet. So MacBook Pro. This is wonderful because it's light. Like I said, I traveled a lot. I still travel some now, and so just slip it in your bag. It weighs like nothing. And I mean, it's all the power that you need to open up a terminal window and SSH to a server. That's it. So that's my powering up my laptop. Just actually involves plugging it into my dock. I do have an obsession with monitors, though. I'm going to let you know. I have a lot of monitors. I have 3, but one of them is 42 inches. Yeah, and so I have that kind of arranged so everything sort of boots, and then I run my little script, and all my windows populate in all the correct areas on my screen. Log in. I'm good to go.
Okay, and then you say that you check the system logs for the services that you're building. I'm a person that is not technical at all. Can you explain what a system log is?
Sure. So I think there's different levels of it, but in essence, it's just literally a log of everything that's been happening that you've wanted to log that's happening on your system, on your server, in your program. The most basic form obviously being like text logs that are just like, this program started at this time, this program ended at this time, or had an error at this time. Obviously, because we're running production systems that people depend on, we collect a lot of really rich data about what's going on, how much memory is being used, all these other kinds of things. And the reason that we do it is because when something happens, you don't just want to correct that one instance of it. You want to understand all of the different kind of symptoms that brought that about. And you want to correct all of those things so that you never have that same type of problem again. And if you do, you see it instantly. And a lot of times you can fix it automatically. Mm-hmm. So good logging is a huge part of that. And there's a lot of tools to help you find anomalies and things like that out there that are kind of machine learning automated. But I still love to just check my logs just as a person in the mornings, because sometimes you see cool stuff.
Examples of irregularities are latencies between Blend's different systems because, as you can imagine, there's a lot of complicated moving parts. There are also times where Keith could find really cool stuff, like the system performing in an unexpected way. In both cases, he logs it in great detail in a ticket, flags anyone necessary on the team, and moves on to the next task, which is code reviewing. Now it's 10:30.
So this is my next part of the day, which is code reviews and PRs, which are pull requests. So one of the things that we do as teams, we all have kind of experience in certain areas, things that we've coded or that we know best, or techniques that we're the best at, or whatever. When people want to make changes to critical systems, or any system actually in the code, it's really heavily controlled, right? We want to make sure that people aren't introducing bugs accidentally or on purpose, which honestly never happens at our company, which is great. But it's just it's an audit trail, and you need to be able to provide that audit trail to your customers and to yourself for peace of mind. You need to know what's going on. And so when people want to make changes to the code, they'll basically write all their code. They put it up, and we use GitHub, like a private hosted version of that. And so you get to see a diff of the code, what's changed in the code, and usually comments from the person that's making that change. Why am I making the change? What was the business case? Like, this is why I think this is the best way to do it. And you go through it line by line, and you make sure, as someone that's close to that subject matter expert or sub-expert, that what is being done makes sense. And we always work in pairs. So no one person ever commits something to our servers without it being reviewed by minimum one other subject matter expert. And most commonly, especially in our larger systems, multiple people review it. So the code base might be kind of vast, and then each area of the code base has specific experts, and those experts are pulled in whenever things in that area are touched. And that makes us kind of a little bit more cautious about just like click it, set it, and forget it, and be like, it'll be fine. We don't do that.
So then what's your area of expertise then? Because you review some of this stuff, right?
Yes, I do. Every morning. It's fun. So we have we use the kind of a microservice architecture for our backend, which means there are a lot of little services that have their own context, like their own business context. So rather than writing a really huge application that can be sort of unwieldy to grow or change or build, we have a lot of little applications that are really purpose built. So it's easy to update them, remove them, add new ones, whatever needs to happen, depending on the shifts in the business. And so I work a lot on our integration server, things that are related to the API, things that are related to file generation for our customers. We have like different interchange formats that are common in the banking industry. So all the transforms related to that. And then more kind of on the more fun computer science, like cool project side, we have a couple systems that our group has built that deal with task management. So asynchronous task management. When we have like long, complicated chains of tasks that need to happen, we have systems that coordinate those between all the other little systems and external systems. So debugging those.
And then, so you're reviewing this, right?
That's right.
And you are looking at it from, making sure that it fits Blend's criteria and their like where are you getting that guidance from, I guess? Is that just like...
No, that's a really good question. I think most large companies have written style guides, not just for their marketing materials, but also for their coders, for their engineers. And that's about, what are the approved languages? What are the approved systems that you can work with? Like these things that fit our regulatory requirements, right? We have a similar situation. So we're obviously in the finance space, so there are regulatory requirements. Other people need to look at this and make sure that it's safe and secure and all that sort of stuff. So we have a list of approved technologies. We experiment a lot, but things that make it to production obviously have a lot of rigor behind them. So there's a set of things that we prefer you to use for that have been pre-approved, pre-vetted.
Blend startup status allows employees the agency to suggest solutions or additions to the company's approved practices with what Keith calls the different architectural councils within the company. Employees with ideas follow a request for comment process to make sure the proposal is workshopped and thought through from all angles of the business before it's presented to the CTO.
If you see an opportunity and you think that you can do something better, everyone is usually willing to listen. There's not a lot of ego, which I think is super fun, because people are ready to learn new stuff. And the answer is usually, it's not like people are like grasping onto these old systems. They're like, delete it, let's build it today. It's great. Yeah, it's really fun.
I wanted to jump into the specific programming languages that you are an expert on, and then what Blend uses as a whole as well. Are you an expert on everything?
I'm not an expert on everything. I started learning just basic HTML, learning to program websites when I was little. And I think my first formal programming training was BASIC on an Apple IIe. So yeah, back in the day. And then moving on to C are my strongest languages, just from work that I've done previously. Blend itself doesn't really use that a lot. We're pretty much entirely web-based. So the common things that we use are JavaScript. We use a variant called TypeScript, which is like a typed JavaScript. Yeah, it just reduces the availability of mistakes. So it's really great, especially if you're using a development tool like VS Code or something like that has parsing. And so if you like mouse over it, it'll tell you, oh, you can't do this. This is wrong because somewhere else in your code you told me this is not how it should look, right? So that we use that a lot. But it's basically just JavaScript with a little sugar on top. Yep. So JavaScript Node is one of our primary things. Node.js, which is like a framework for JavaScript to help build web servers quickly and efficiently. And then Golang is our other really big one. It's just called Go. It's a Google invention, I'd say, Google programming language invention. And it's got a lot of great lower level memory handling features that make it wonderful for programs that you need to write for the web. It's kind of this web first attitude, but that need to be really optimized. Whereas JavaScript is definitely just web first. It's not necessarily optimized. It's really easy to like de-optimize JavaScript, whereas Go is designed to be optimal. So high-speed things, maybe I'm processing documents, images, doing some sort of learning algorithms on the data you're inputting on your website, that sort of stuff is kind of what that tool is built for. So those are our two primary web technologies.
As we mentioned in the usetheforce.com series, Go is definitely a programming language to watch out for in the future. It's now 11:30 a.m. and Keith spends time to work on his personal project for Blend. Right now, he's working on a design spec, which is a step that comes after the request for comment process we mentioned earlier.
And that's sort of what the design spec that I mentioned is where you think you have the solution to this problem that someone has challenged you with, and now you want to convince them exactly how you have that solution and what it's going to cost the company, whether in time or resources or something, to execute.
So during this time, you were working on just getting all of that together?
Yep. So yeah, exactly. Working on, so specifically was working on how to sync information between several different systems. And it's an interesting and really fun and challenging problem because you have to keep track of where the source of truth is at any given time. And determining that's pretty hard. So I was working on a shared design doc, and it's normally not just one person working on this. Several people from different areas of expertise will be working together, drawing diagrams, writing out, schemas, code snippets, pseudocode, that sort of stuff, just to give the reader an idea of how you're going to proceed with enough detail that you can provide work estimates so that you can kind of say, look, I know that this is going to cost one engineering month, but I think it'll save us 10 engineering months over the next 2 years, that sort of thing. So you want to be able to make that case.
Who decides what you work on day to day in terms of like your personal projects?
Interesting question. So there is a larger vision that the organization is driving to, and that vision has been fairly constant and consistent since I have been there. And how we kind of move towards that vision in a particular quarter gets decided by our product organization. So we have this really cool, really dynamic product organization that actually is led by our CEO. I personally, I don't know if you can quote me on this, but I think it's his passion. I personally think it's his passion. So he heads up our product group, in addition to being the CEO, again, someone that doesn't sleep somehow, does a great job at it. And basically they set kind of these ideas of like, we think that the future is this, and we're going to work on it for this quarter or the next 2 quarters or the next year or the next 2 years. Maybe it's a 5-year goal. And then they work backwards as a product org to kind of think about what the market fit is for the individual project components that'll help us get there. So we get that information, and that information is sort of discussed with the engineering managers, the resource allocation side of the engineering management team. They will talk to the subject matter experts in the different departments, kind of figure out how long it'll take to build something. Is it feasible? How many people? And then they take all that data back, and product and the engineering kind of people management, they work together to make a plan for that quarter of what we're going to work on. So you have these high-level projects that you're driving towards. One of the cool things and one of my favorite things about Blend is that people don't just walk around and hand out, like, you're coding these 4 things this month. Usually it's a conversation where an engineering manager or a product manager will come to you and say, I want to be able to do this when I log in. Tell me how you think I can do that. Work with your team to figure out how you can meet these acceptance criteria. How can you make the application work this way? And then, do it. Make it work. Deliver it. And so you get a lot of freedom of kind of how creative or not creative you want to be in the process. You can let the product manager completely drive your development cycle if maybe you're busy working on something else and you just need that work stream, or you can take it upon yourself to work with the product manager and the engineering kind of resource manager and develop a project.
After he works on the design spec, it's now 1 p.m., his favorite time of the day. He's not him when he's hungry.
I love lunch. Lunch is important to me. It's like super important to me. One of my favorite things about lunchtime is that people actually step away from their desks and I get to eat. Those are my two favorite things, actually. It's a great time to sort of disconnect from what you're doing, refresh your brain, just kind of get to know your coworkers a little bit better. Yeah, I love lunch. And yes, lunch does devolve a lot of times into whiteboarding sessions in the engineering group. Like, we'll start talking about cool stuff and then we'll end with a whiteboard because it's a burning problem that someone has to solve. But I think it's a nice time to connect with people and just step back.
Now it's 2 p.m. and it's time for pod stand-ups. Keith does a better job of explaining what a pod is.
So basically we have like this kind of hierarchy that's not a hierarchy. So again, functional groups, and obviously our strategies change, the things that we're working on change. So rather than having a department, like my department is integrations like it used to be, now we have all these people. What we do is we create like functional work units, large units for like large quarterly strategies or yearly strategies. And then subunits that are helping drive individual goals that kind of roll up to that. So the larger kind of department or larger group, whatever you want to call it, is people working on the same concept or the same like revenue goal, the same business purpose. And then the individual components are how we're going to get there. And the pod is one of the individual components. And so, for example, perhaps one of our goals is to create an entirely new customer experience for a particular type of loan. Well, there's a bunch of pods that are going to be a part of that. There's going to be a pod that work on the front end user experience. There's going to be a pod that's going to interface with our partners and make sure that we can get the data in the same way. There's going to be a pod that's thinking through all of the compliance and regulatory issues, like so that sort of.
So then does this pod grouping also work with sprint planning as well? Like it's all integrated?
Yes. And
that's what you're doing next after
exactly.
this, right?
And that's not every day, to be clear.
Okay.
So our sprints, people have different sprint lengths. We happen to choose 2 weeks because it also seems to be really related to a lot of the partners that we have. So we try to like keep our work units aligned. So we work in these 2-week groupings. What can you accomplish in 2 weeks as an individual engineer? What can you deliver as your pod? What is your entire group going to deliver in that 2-week period? And the reason that we do that is, one, to keep things really time bounded and small. So you're like kind of always progressing forward. Even if something seems insurmountable or like overwhelming, you just kind of want to keep walking, right? You don't ever want to stop. And then the other reason is because having those like kind of discrete units of work allows other pods and other groups to then plan against what you're doing in a way that's way more efficient than being like, yeah, by the end of the quarter, we're going to have X, Y, and Z.
Keith's sprint planning specifically for the pod that's responsible for building infrastructure for integration technology, handling specific integration points for their clients. So what does that mean exactly?
So we do have an infrastructure team, and we consider that team the group of folks who work on the underlying systems that run the whole company. Kind of what we build on top of, I guess would be the best way to think of that group. Our group is building a layer above that, which is the infrastructure to handle pulling all the data in from our partners and getting that to our customers. It could be bidirectional. In this particular instance, the sprint planning we were actually working on, something that relates to syncing multiple systems together at the same time. So coordination between like a lot of different partner systems. And that's kind of what we're aiming for this one.
So now it's 3:00 and you're doing some design review.
Yes. Design review is something that happens after you have completed an engineering spec and people feel really comfortable with it. Usually you iterate with your partners, the people that you work the closest with a little bit to get input and make sure your ideas are sound. Then you kind of put it up to people that have more experience with you for some initial review. Finally, when you feel comfortable with what you've designed in your spec, we have an engineering review. And this is where generally the most experienced people, the subject matter experts that happen to be in the company, come in and they will have reviewed your spec already. A lot of times they will have already commented and you would have conversations. This is more of like a group decision of, is this comfortable to begin work on? Are there any major concerns? Do we need to go back to the drawing board? And using kind of all of their experience, drawing on that experience well. So design review, they can take anywhere from like 15 minutes to 2 hours, depending on how contentious the issue is, how many people need to be invited, how exciting the issue is. Sometimes if it's like something really cool, people show up just because it's super cool. So during that process, basically we were just looking at a design that someone in our group had made. I happened to be on the reviewing side of it that time rather than the talking side of it that time.
Which side do you like better?
I definitely like the talking side better. I find the reviewing side to be super intense.
Ooh, interesting. How so?
Just, when someone asks you for like an opinion that is really final, it's a very time consuming, right? You spend a lot of time analyzing every little bit of it to make sure that you're giving the right advice and you're not misleading someone, right? Because you're educating. So yeah, it's interesting. So that's kind of 3 o'clock. I think that probably took an hour in this particular day. And it's always fun, especially when you give someone the green stamp at the end, because people get real excited. They like rush out of the room, run right back to their desk, and suddenly you have a bunch of pull requests. Like all the things that I dreamed of are coming true.
It's now 4 p.m. and Keith is in headphone mode coding. But before he does anything else, Keith grabs a cup of coffee. Tell us about the headphone rule.
Coding, yes. So this is another block that I put down. Literally on my calendar, it just says, do not book coding. A lot of folks do that too, right? So you plan that time to focus. And in our role, there's an spoken kind of, I guess, understanding that when you have your headphones on, you're to be left alone. Like, is the building on fire? Okay, you can interrupt my headphone time. Is the building not on fire? Now's not the appropriate time for a conversation. So, and people really respect that because you're kind of in your headspace. And a lot of times I might not even listen to music. I might just have my headphones on with noise canceling on and just really be focusing on a problem or challenge. But I find that time for me, I kind of get into that coding flow. And it's just like any other creative endeavor. It's a lot of experience, a lot of science, but also a lot of creativity. You just sort of need to get in the rhythm. And being in your own headspace helps me, and I guess a lot of other people that work, at least in the New York office. So,
what were you coding? Do you remember on this day?
Let's see. What was I coding? Oh, yeah. Actually, I do remember what I was coding on this day. So I got really excited about changing the way our system health checks work. So we have these things called health checks, which a lot of people have in their servers that reach out to the servers at certain intervals and gather information to make sure that they're not dead. And a lot of times they gather ancillary data to help determine other signs of health. And I had an idea for changing the way that we did it. And I probably spent almost an hour doing literally nothing, just like fiddling. Good times.
And then it is brainstorming time.
Yes. So I think I was pretty brain dead by the end of this day. And I decided that I really liked the idea of these health checks and that I wanted to go talk to everyone that was sitting around me about it and go to the kitchen and eat cheese. So we just rolled the whiteboard into the kitchen, pulled out snacks, and just started drawing about how we could extend this and like, hey, these are the things I found in the last hour. I'm really excited about it. What do you guys think?
On this particular day, Keith was out of the office by 6, but that's a rarity for him. He tries his best to unplug and recharge, but his passion for programming gets in the way most of the time.
I try to limit my day because I found like I could just keep going, especially if I'm in the zone, but I will burn out. And that's something to really keep in mind is like, you may be kind of hooked up on caffeine. You may be super excited to be coding whatever you're coding, but it's really important, honestly, in my mind, like take a moment and just turn it off. Yeah. Right. Which I, as we will talk about in a moment, did not do a great job of doing on this day. I went home. I took the subway home because it started raining. Then I got home and I was still into it. So I just started coding again.
Is this something for Blend or
Yes.
is this something? Okay. Workaholic over
I was
here.
just like super pumped and I was like writing home and I had some ideas to solve an issue that I couldn't solve before. And then and my husband was like, get off your computer.
I was just going to ask what peels you away, I guess, is
Family time. Yeah, I think it's important. Sometimes you're in the flow. Sometimes you're working just like any creative thing. But you also have to know when to like turn it off and enjoy what you have in your life, right? And just take a moment because honestly, you don't want to work 15-hour days forever. You want to take the time to let your brain recharge and you'll be better off the next day. And like that process of experiencing other things is what I think helps you be creative in the long run.
That wraps up part 1 in the 2-part software and soft skills series with Blend software engineer Keith Soura. Is this a job you could see yourself doing? Want to learn what hard and soft skills you'll need? Join us in part 2 where we'll walk through Keith's very impressive resume from undergrad onward, from retail to computer programming. Stay tuned.
You can get to know us and our guests more by keeping up with us on social. Join our community on Instagram and LinkedIn at Experience a Diddle. That's Experience ADITL. Thanks for listening. To find the show notes with all relevant links and photos for this series, head over to experienceaditl.com. That's experienceaditl.com.
If you learned something in this episode, please take some time to help our mission by leaving a positive rating and review of the show. Each week, we bring you a new interview series with guests from different jobs and industries. So, don't forget to subscribe.